I'd like to introduce Joanna O'Brien. She's a senior at the University of Buffalo, pursuing a BA in linguistics with also a minor in Korean. She has taken several classes of the classics department, and particular interest in classical Greco-Roman architecture and how it's still used in many modern architecture today. So I'll introduce her.
I'm going to show you this church. It's called Holy Family Church, and what interested me about it was besides on the outside, there's actually a lot of restored art on the inside that was painted in the early 20th century, but painted over, so completely covered up in the 1960s. The art is specifically Irish art, which is important to the very heavy Irish immigrant population here in Buffalo. So the Irish art comes from this. This is the Book of Kells, and if you don't know what it is the oldest illuminated manuscript of the Gospels that is in existence. It's considered like a masterpiece of Irish art in general, also Christian art, so the art I'm about to show you really a hidden gem. There's also quite a bit of Roman architecture involved in church architecture because the Catholic Church does have its roots in Rome. So as we take a walk through this church, not only are we going to see the Irish art that I just talked about, we're going to see a lot of Roman influence. So lots of columns, lots of arches, lots of vaulting. The first few arches we're going to see in a minute here. This is called a triumphal arch. So a triumphal arch means three freestanding arches adjacent to each other. In ancient Rome, that symbolized a triumphant entry into Rome after, say, a successful military campaign. It was adopted by Christians to kind of frame the entry into the church to symbolize a triumphant entry into heaven rather than back into Rome after a successful military campaign. Right after you go through the arches, this is what you see. It's called the nave. It's really pretty, it kind of speaks for itself. I feel like I don't have to say anything, but we're going to take a closer look at a lot of the things that you see here, which again, were not there a few years ago because all of this art was covered up in the 1960s, but restored recently by Buffalo's Tech Studios. Starting with this is called a barrel vault. It's kind of like if you took a ton of arches, Roman arches, lined them up next to each other. Super important in Roman architecture, also actually ancient Egyptian architecture. But the motifs, like the patterns that you see on the arches right there, even the color of the ceiling was different before the restoration project. So this is a cross vault, again, very important in Roman architecture. It's basically taking two arches and forming the ceiling just based off of those. But again, very important in Roman architecture, and we see a blend of the Irish art here. In between the intersections, those little groups of three, like the knots, those are called Trinity knots. Those are common amongst the Book of Kells and just Irish art in general. And this is just a close-up shot on another part of the ceiling. I wish I could show you the whole thing, but it's hard to recap all the symbols that you see here, but you see a lot of Trinity dots. Those are like the three red dots. Those are all over the Book of Kells, also all over this church. Lots of Celtic knots, and a lot of beautiful things that weren't there a few years ago. So in keeping with the Roman theme, I've decided to show you a few beautiful columns. So on the right here, this is just, well, my right, this is a just freestanding column in all of its glory, and then that smaller one, that's called a colonnette. Again, used very commonly in church architecture because of the Roman influence. And here, this on my left, that is a picture from the Book of Kells. This is one of the transepts of the church. What struck me was how the shape is so similar to this page of the Book of Kells, which is actually one of the tables of contents. So again, all this painting that you're seeing here was very recently restored and painted over a few years ago. This is St. Joseph's niche, and the wall behind him, again, completely blank before it was restored. You didn't see any of those Celtic knots. You didn't see the lilies that are above his head there. Lilies in Christianity represent, among other things, purity. So you'll often see St. Joseph depicted with them. This is Mary's niche, same story with her. The wall behind her was completely blank before the restoration, and now you have all this Book of Kells inspired art behind her. It really is remarkable what they were able to do. And again, she also has lilies above her. She and St. Joseph kind of get their places of honor, as it were, in the church because they are very, very important in Catholic theology. This is the altar, and behind it you can kind of see the Celtic tracery or tapestry paintings there. They're behind the altar, which is made out of solid marble, so I could not like move that out of the way to take pictures of just the paintings here, but again, that is important. And the altar just on its own, very pretty. You can see like the mini columns there echoing Roman sentiments. And this is the dome. I feel like it's another one of those things that I could just let stay there, but this was, because it's so pretty, but this was a different picture before the restoration. The painting was not exactly the same. It was similar in shape, but the part that interests me the most is actually this part at the top here, the Star of David. That was, I think, a picture of the Holy Ghost before, but in Hebrew letters in the middle it says Yahweh. And then surrounding it, you see a lot of Irish art. Now, you very rarely see Hebrew art in the Hebrew language in the Catholic Church, which is interesting. And I really love how it's blending with the Trinity knots and the other Irish motifs here. These are some of the oldest paintings in the church, not completely restored, but that just helps us appreciate how old they are. On the left is the encounter on the road to Emmaus, which is when Christ met some of his apostles after resurrection. On the other side is the supper at Emmaus, and below that in Latin, I don't think you can completely see it, but it says, "We knew him by the breaking of bread." This is the St. Cecilia window. The woman you see in the middle, that St. Cecilia, and the style of window is called a rose window. But this window is right above the choir loft because St. Cecilia in Catholic theology is the patroness of musicians. So how fitting to have her right there in their midst, right above the choir loft where the musicians traditionally are. And I thought I'd end on a picture of a Celtic cross just because it's so well known. And this is right on the pulpit if you're curious of the church. But if you would like to see this church for yourself, Mass is on Sunday, predictably at 11:30 a.m. So that's this beautifully recently restored church.